The trade war between United States and China is topical, but is only the visible part of a battle whose weapons are not always conventional. The economy, which is a management in which all unnecessary expenses are avoided, is now pushing political leaders to fire all their energy to sell or buy without constraint, to remain by all means leaders. The obscure weapons of trade war is the subject of this edition of Economy First on Freeka TV, your television, and thank you for watching us. To talk about it, we received today Mr. Dr. Yam Timba, an economist. Good morning, Mr. Yam Timba, and welcome.
Thank you. Good morning.
Okay. My first question is, are you aware about between United States and China trade war?
I've heard something about. I heard people talking about, but I don't know if what's happening is really a trade war. But anyway, I've heard something like that.
How do you analyze it?
In an unconventional way. I'm not really interested in talking about only a trade war, because this is just the foam at the edge of the waves. This is not the real problem. The real problem is something else.
Can you give us an idea about how this powerful state proceed to dominate the world?
This is what is happening exactly. It is about the domination of the world. We are not talking in the conflict between China and the US today. Currently, it's not really or definitely about economy. It's definitely about the domination of the world, about the leadership of the world. So we noticed that during the last 40 years, China was industrializing itself and America was disindustrializing itself. So, and most of the things that are consumed in America are made out of America, and most of them are made in China. We remember in the 90s when everybody was calling China the plant of the world. So now America have noticed that due to this industrialization of China, then China will inevitably become the wealthiest nations in the world within the 10 or 15 years, and China will become also the leader of the world. You just see what is happening, because the IMF, the World Bank Group, is controlled by America. But now China has created an financial institution to fund the infrastructures. And this financial institution is as powerful as the IMF. So what's happening is, as the World Bank, the whole World Bank, so what's happening is this battle for the leadership of the world. And economy is just a visible aspect of this battle. And what people can talk about, it is that when it happens that a nation is declining, like America is declining, and there is another nation that is rising up, there is always this kind of battle between the rising nation and declining nation. And it appears to be an economic battle, but it's not really an economic battle. Let me tell you that if America can do all they can, but they will never again, America can never again be at the level of China in the economic sector. The American president can put taxes on China's product, even for $1,000 billion. There still will be the other parts of the world that will be buying Chinese products. So that's how it happens. In the beginning of the 20th century, we have seen what happened between England, between Great Britain and the USA. So people were start buying American products, and Great Britain declined. So that's what's happened. And what they do to dominate the world, we generally think about trade, we generally think about industry, we generally think about scientific and technological leadership. But the base of all this is financial leadership. That's what China is showing with this institution for funding infrastructures, with this initiative, the Belt and the Road. So it's almost something that should be negotiated in a very smooth way, not in this confrontational way, because, believe it or not, China is always in economy the leader of the world.
Is it this economic war that justifies the repeat of computer data?
No. It's something that's always happened in the world. People are always stealing data. People are always looking for where they can find the information they need to solve the problems they have, be it in their industries, in agriculture, in science, in research, and all this. The steal of data is just the new way people go and take what others have. That's all. Let me tell you something that happened when they were building the bridge over the sea between Hong Kong, Macau, and Shanghai. They were needing, Chinese were in need of some technologies that only people of Holland could provide, but under maybe the European Union pressure or the American pressure, they refused to buy the technology to Chinese. So Chinese tried and decided to develop it by themselves. They did, but things not always happen like this. Sometimes you can send your students to foreign universities. This is a way you can use to take something from them. Sometimes you just read scientific papers. You just read daily news. You just look at TV. You just search things in internet, and you find the technologies others are using. But sometimes also you have some very sensitive technologies, very sensitive processes that you cannot find everywhere, and you have two ways to obtain them.
Yes.
You buy them, or three ways. You buy them, you develop them by yourself, or you try to steal them. So sometimes people just steal them because they are available and because they can steal them. They can steal them. And sometimes it can be, when it is about, for example, health issues, people tend to see it unfair to have these technologies and not to share them with others. But it can be military technologies, it can be industrial technologies, it can be just things that we use to process certain things every day. And most of the time people develop them by themselves, they buy it or they steal it. So it is not because people are stealing it now that it can appear to be something new. People have always done this. People have done it, they have stolen information from Egypt. Most of what you see today as a European or a religion in the world, what the basis of mathematics, the basis of agronomics, the basics of economics, laws, the basics of science in one way have been stolen from Egypt by Europeans or people from other parts of the world. So people steal or buy it, but sometimes they went there to study. They have not only stolen things, they have also studied there. So people can study there, people can steal there, people can buy it. So what's happening is that even if you consider the fact that these informations have been stolen, so people have learned how to be able to steal this. And you must think that unless we drive the world now to an international government that will share the wealth of the world among everybody in the world, there will be always the possibility, or there will be always the opportunity for some nations, because their culture should be maybe accept this kind of behavior, some nations will always steal some things. So, and sometimes some other nations will be accused of being thieves, data thieves, but maybe they are not. It can be just fake news. It can be just white flags, as they say.
So it's normal that now some countries cheat today or modify a technology
yes,
to sell it more expensive.
Let me tell you something. You see these cameras?
Yes.
If we were serious enough in our country, we should just take all these cameras, completely put them apart, and then try to produce part 1, part 2, part 3, and then reach the level where we can use all these cameras. You should know that most of the time, people are not necessarily stealing technology. Most of the time, people send their students all abroad the world. They have their own research facilities in their country, and they buy your products, and they can just put it into parts and then tear it all down into parts, and then they study what you have produced and try to produce the same thing, or try to produce something that is better. So, and sometimes when a nation have taken 10 years to develop something and see another nation that have taken only 2 years to develop it, they say they have stolen our technology. Not necessarily. Most of the time, they have bought what you have produced, and then they have torn it down into parts and try to study what it is, give deadlines to their own researchers, and then they do the same. They will take less time than you. And most of the time, technology is not really stolen. Let me tell you something. There is a law in science and technology. What you see as technology represents only 25% of all the scientific informations that we have. So when you take this 25%, it's just something that have been densified so as to become technology and to become the products that we use. So if you have the opportunity to know how to put aside what is not necessary to drive a technological trend, to drive the technological opportunities, then you will just produce faster than others what they have taken so much time to produce. Because when you have all the theories, when you have all the fundamental research results, and you have the applied results, it's easier for you to produce. So most of the time, technology is not really stolen. It is just people have only reached the level to produce.
How can we better understand this industrialization of the trade war?
I see two things in your question. The first thing, let's understand the industrialization of China and Southeast Asia, and then understand how trade war comes from this industrialization. And the first thing is, this industrialization happens because the traditional theories of economy in the Western world, and this is something that is false. You cannot be thinking that you can lower the cost until there is nothing. There will be always cost to produce. And every time you want to have mass production, or you want to upgrade what you are producing, there should be costs. You cannot be there and thinking that other people will become the plant of the world, and then you will still be the most rich people in the world. That cannot happen. The rich people are those who produce. It is not those who think about what should be produced. No, no way. So what happened in the 60s is that in the Western world, they were thinking that they could produce at lower cost if they produce where they can pay people less than they pay in their own countries. And then they opened plants in Southeast Asia to produce. India, China, Vietnam, Thailand, Malaysia, and so on, and they even started in South Korea. So they started doing this, and these nations were producing more and more. And while you are producing, it's something that is mechanical. You learn. you learn, you discover what the others are doing, and you learn. And every time they order something from you, they have to give you all the drawings of what they are doing. So you learn how it is made. You learn what are the constraints, how to calculate everything. So you learn faster than them. That's why what the Western world was doing since 2 centuries, the Southeast Asia learned it in less than 50 years. Because you learn faster when you have all the drawings, when you know what to do, and when people are ordering from you, and when you build it for them. When you produce something for someone, you learn faster. So it happens that at the end of the 90s, the Western world noticed that this Southeast Asia region is becoming more powerful than them. And that's why you have the first biggest financial crisis in 1998.
Yes.
They were trying to weaken the economies of these people. But they didn't take into consideration something very important. Southeast Asia represents half of the world's population. It's difficult to weaken them. They have a huge market. So that's the first thing. And this is where the trade war comes from. Because people forget about the trade war between the US and Japan in the 80s, but let's not talk about. Let's stay in, between China and the US. What happened is that.
But they are friends now.
I don't know if they are friends. I don't think in this. I don't think they are friends. I think they are allies, and they have objective interest that unite them. But they are not. They are not really friends that you think. If you remember what happened between Nissan and Renault. Let me tell you that when you talk about the US, or talk about the whole Western world. If you see what is happening between Renault and Nissan, I don't think they are so close friends. I think they are allies who are trying to see how they can work together, but they are not so close friends. So the Southeast Asia region is now industrialized. They produce all things. Let me tell you something. China is able to produce today 98% of all the products you have in the world. Even the US cannot do that. The United States can produce around 55% or 60% of all the products that we use in the world. China can produce 98%. So this can give you the level of power of China in the world economy. And you have aside this nation that have the most important power in financial institutions in the world, the US. And they see that they are buying more and more from China. And I don't want to talk about finance because it's quite complicated for everybody. But let's talk mostly about the fact that US is importing more from China and China is importing less. And China gained much more money from the US. And America cannot produce most of the products they consume. And this is where this trade war come from. And Donald Trump, who is a former businessman, is thinking about like a businessman. Okay, these people are earning more money than me. Let's see how we can earn something more and try to put all this into a level that we will not be losing more. I don't know if it is the best way to think about. I don't know if it is good to start by this. Maybe they should have started by making better roads in the US, by trying to end all the wars that they are involved in. Because one of the things that you don't know, while America, and Jack Ma told this to the Americans, while they were spending in Iraq $3,000 billion only in Iraq and Afghanistan, China was investing the same amount in high roads, in highway in bullet trains, in industry in general, in research, in universities, in schools, in agriculture. They were building their towns. And America was spending the money killing people in Iraq. So you cannot compete with these people. You cannot compete with people who are using their money to train their own children while you are using your money to make war. You cannot compete with them. That's what is happening.
Thank you. We remind you that you are on the television channel Freka TV, and the program is Economy First. Today we receive Mr. Dr. Yam Chimba. My next question: has the emergence of new technology become a fatal weapon for some states to continue to dominate the world and impose their law on the market?
No, the new technologies we have now is completely bringing the other side of what you are thinking about. It is let me take a clear, simple example. Look at a rising nation like Kenya. 30 years ago, Kenya, it was striving with a lot of difficulties, but since the development, the offspring of internet and the development of internet and all these connectivity networks, you've seen what's happening in Kenya.
Yes.
You see this mobile money. You see all these IT technopoles that are they are created hubs that are creating in Kenya. No, new technologies will just change the paradigm of what we see as economic development since the 19th century. And this is what China is using. This is what China is using, and this is what America is not understanding. In America, people like to see the GAFA, what is called the GAFA, Google, Amazon, Facebook, and Apple. In other countries, this is not how it works. In other countries, they use technology to create all these small companies. You have a galaxy of small companies that made the basis, the foundation of the economy of China. In America, you have these very big companies, what they call Fortune 500. You cannot build your economy, you cannot have a very strong economy if you want to compete with someone who have a strong basis of SMEs. It's difficult because you have all the big companies, they work with a network, a large network of SMEs. You don't have, you have, this is not what you're having in the US. In the 50s, or let's say during the Second World War, what happened in the United States is that they have a large network of small companies. All these have been killed during the years, the 60s, the 70s, and the 80s. So they don't have strong foundations. In China, they use technology to create and to propel these small companies.
Thank you. Aren't the arrest of certain senior executives of multinationals, sudden indictments, or researchers obscure weapons of this economic domination of the weakest?
No, let's not talk about all these considerations. Let's keep talking about trade war, because I don't want to talk about morality or these kind of things. It's not relevant.
Okay.
Not relevant about this topic. It can be very relevant in a country like Africa, where we need people with high moral standards. But let's not judge others. Let them be. Let's just look at them. Let's not judge them.
We realize that espionage is indeed part of the weapons of this trade war.
I've told you earlier that there are always have been nations have always been spying each other. This is not something new.
When all a nation, in quotation marks, overtakes you, should we use the International Monetary Fund, the World Bank, to blackmail you?
This is how the Western world is trying to. It is. How can I tell? I'll just say this easily, a very simple way. These tools have been created by the Western world.
Yes.
At the end of the Second World War. They are using them to fight these rising nations, because China will become, within 2030, there will be the wealthiest economy in the world. Within 2050, India will overtake the US. Within 30 years, India will overtake the US. And the 5 wealthiest economies in the world by 2100, there will be no Western economy winning. You will have China, you have India, you have Russia, you have Indonesia, and maybe Nigeria and Brazil. There will be no Western economy among the 5 first economies in 2100. So they are fighting. But do you remember in our village when you were trying to have your hen for dinner? You always battle, but it ends in your dish. So what will happen is that I think this is not the best way to fight this in this trade war. America should not use the World Bank, the IMF in this trade war, because this should be considered today as a universal asset of all the world. And we can use this to try to solve the trade war and try to see how we can have a better world. Because by the time the World Bank and the IMF will be in one side, the other side will develop new tools to fight them. And I'm not really sure that in the current situation today, America will win. Let me tell you something. Have you seen the G7 summit? The G7 summit represents today only 19% of the world wealth. It is very far from what it was in the 20th century, maybe in the 80s, when it was representing something like 50 or 60% of the world's wealth. They represent 19% only of the wealth in the world. And if you take China itself, China only, no, they represent 39%, but China represents 28%. When you have 39% of the wealth in the world by 7 countries, that boosts to be the leaders of the world, and only one nation representing 28%. It means that there is no trade war, there is a leadership battle only.
To end this program, do you have something to add between the trade war?
No, I don't have to add something about this, but I have something to tell Africans. I want to tell them that we should never become respectable in the world if we don't involve, if we don't try to understand what is happening, and we don't try to make our own way. Because trade war between the United States and China just revealed that if you want to be a leader in this world, if you want to be respected in this world, you have to work hard. And maybe people work too much, but people don't work properly in Africa, and we lose a lot of time while we have to be better organized so that we can produce more and better. I've just contributed to a book that will be published in Canada by the end of this year. And the most important subject on which I stressed was about organization. How do we organize ourselves so that we can pull out from this poverty and then become a very respected actor in the world theater?
Thank you to our expert, Mr. Yam Timba. Mr. Yam Timba, thank you. It was a good moment. You are always accepting our invitation.
Thank you.
Okay. See you soon on Freeka TV. Goodbye.